So some Chiefs fans are rather upset by the fact that there seems to be some concerning weaknesses once again along the roster that might need to be addressed as soon as possible. Combine that with the fact that 6 players got banged up during last night's preseason loss, and there could be changes coming for multiple position groups. So I've got to talk about that, some standout players, one of the most unexpected punt returns I've ever seen get taken to the house, and more. But first, how about those? All right, so another preseason game is in the books. The Chiefs lost. Who cares? Came with some highlights, positive, some highlights, negative, along with some legitimate concerns, though the overall sample size from some of these players makes it difficult to overreact too strongly one way or the other. To start things off, some context is needed for this game. The Seahawks were absolutely gouging the Chiefs' defense in the run game, at one point averaging nearly 10 yards a carry early on. I mean, it was run after run after run, and when you look at the defensive line, the only guy who didn't play at all was Chris Jones. It was largely the starting defensive line aside from the CEO of Sack Nation. So yes, I was watching the beginning of this game like, oh boy, this is rough. However, it's also worth noting that several other key defenders did not play that would normally be in to help quite a bit against the run. Linebackers Nick Bolton and Drue Tranquill, and then cornerbacks Jalen Watson, Christian Fulton, and Trent McDuffie all remained on the sideline, not playing a single snap. And I think that, combined with the Chiefs and many other teams often running a more vanilla game plan, did not help things one bit. Having linebackers and defensive backs that fully understand their assignments in the run game, especially linebackers like Nick Bolton, who runs the defense, and Drue Tranquill, would be really effective against the run. Bolton also calls the defense, so hopefully this helps you guys not be as stressed about the Chiefs' run defense, even though, to be clear, I'm not fully excusing the run defense. It was not a great showing and definitely embarrassing at times. The run game was going so well for the Seahawks, by the way, that every quarterback that played in that game threw a combined 21 pass attempts, whereas there were nearly 50 rush attempts. So that also affected the pass rushers' ability to rack up pressures from the Chiefs' D-line. There was only 7 recorded, in fact, and initially I was like, yikes again. But then, with context of how little the Seahawks actually threw the ball, it does help. In spite of that, though, I wanted to see a bit more from somebody earlier on in this game. Anybody, really. I know Chris Jones was out. The D-line is kind of built around him, but any flash from a pass rush perspective from basically anybody would have been nice, and it really didn't happen. I think outside of that, the biggest concern for the defense was the crazy amount of injuries that took place, and this is why the key starters rested on both sides of the ball. Andy Reid was very smart in doing that. Turf plus rain equals awful field. By the end of the game, Nazeeh Johnson was ruled out with a shoulder injury. Linebacker Jack Cochran suffered some sort of a knee injury. Defensive end Felix Anudike-Uzomah pulled a hammy, and while he was able to walk off the field on his own power, he was actually assisted by 2 trainers to the locker room shortly after, unable to put pressure on that leg. Then safety Mike Edwards suffered a hamstring injury as well. Defensive tackle Omar Norman-Lott retweaked that ankle injury he's been dealing with since basically the beginning of training camp. And if all that wasn't enough, cornerback Noel Williams suffered a concussion. So that is 6 injuries, all on the defensive side of the ball. The least concerning of them is probably Noel Williams, who should be out of concussion protocol sooner rather than later, and Omar Norman-Lott, who did return to finish out the game, at least in regards to the snaps they wanted him to play on defense. The other players, we don't yet know the severity. As Andy Reid said, some of them will need to get further imaging done to determine the extent of said injuries. Nazeeh made some plays too prior to leaving with the shoulder, including a perfectly timed pass breakup in the back of the end zone shortly before Brian Cook almost had an interception and forced a turnover on downs. Once Nazeeh left, the guy a lot of Chiefs fans wanted to play more because, this is their words, he was better than Nazeeh, proceeded to get mossed in the end zone for a touchdown, and that was Joshua Williams. By game's end, Williams actually had the worst coverage grade out of any defensive back on the roster, whereas for what it's worth, Nazeeh had the highest. Now, last week, I think it was almost the inverse. Joshua Williams, I believe, had the highest coverage grade, but that's the thing with that guy. You want consistency. That's what the defensive backs coach Dave Merritt and Steve Spagnuolo have said. From some of these depth piece defensive backs, we want consistency day in and day out, not just every once in a while. So the reality is, Nazeeh Asazi is still probably the best option on the depth chart after guys like Trent McDuffie, Jalen Watson, and Christian Fulton. Noel Williams could continue climbing the ranks as well, and while he did make some plays here and there, he had a couple of illegal hands to the face penalties and was targeted 3 times in coverage, giving up 3 receptions before going down in the third quarter with that concussion. Mike Edwards was looking all right out there at times at safety, but with him also dealing with a hamstring, that safety room is starting to get pretty thin when you also consider safety Deon Bush tore his Achilles and he is out for the season. If the hamstring injury for Edwards is minor, then okay, good news, and hopefully he's able to work into the rotation come week 1, week 2, somewhere around there. But if it's more serious, I think they need to consider adding a veteran safety via free agency. There's some serviceable guys still available for sure. And while yes, Chamari Connor, Brian Cook, and Jaden Hicks, plus Roland Wallace at times is a decent room, if one of those guys go down, I'm going to start to get pretty nervous. Then regarding linebacker Jack Cochran, I don't love him having a knee injury because he was out there as the starting Mike linebacker last night and would be either the guy to fill in for Nick Bolton or the guy after Drew Tranquill if they got injured, and then he had the second most special team snaps of any player on the roster last year. All that to say, Cochran is a pretty underrated and valuable player for that defense and special teams. Felix Anudike-Uzomah's hamstring injury might be more serious than some of these other guys, at least it seems that way based on him not being able to walk into the locker room on his own power. That would be a bummer for the former first-round pick that has really underwhelmed so far. He was 3rd on the depth chart behind Ashton Gelati heading into this game and really needed a solid preseason this go-round. So hopefully with all these guys I just talked about with the injuries, it's more on the minor side of things and it's nothing too serious because that would be a definite blow to the depth of this defense in multiple position groups. And before I move on to the offense, I did want to give a shout out to linebacker Jeffrey Bossa, the Chiefs' 5th round draft pick. He made multiple plays last night against the run, showing great vision and completely blowing up multiple run plays. He's done this in back-to-back weeks as well, and overall, I think he's had one of the most impressive showings out of any other rookie on defense. Next up, I want to talk about the offense, where there was some good, yet also some not-so-good things to talk about. But first, with preseason over halfway over, that means the NFL season is literally right around the corner, and that's why you need to get yourself some tickets sooner rather than later, and is exactly where the sponsor of today's video, SeatGeek, comes right in. They are the #1 rated ticketing app for a reason, boasting over 28 million downloads with more than 70,000 events listed on their site and app. And their app is extremely easy to use. In fact, I almost prefer it over their website. There's plenty of sporting events going on right now too. MLB, WNBA, MLS, NASCAR, and of course the NFL season will be here before we know it. You also can't forget about stuff like concerts, comedians, and festivals. Basically, you name it, there's a very good chance there's tickets for it on SeatGeek. They make the process super easy for you as well, rating tickets on a scale of 1 to 10 so you know you're getting a good deal. Just look for the green dots. Green means good, red means bad. Plus, every ticket is backed by their buyer guarantee, and you know I had to come through for you guys. You can use code HBTC10 for 10% off your next set of tickets on SeatGeek. That's 10% off any tickets with promo code HBTC10. Just make sure you click the link in the description to download the app and have the code automatically added to your account so you can use it later. Thanks again, SeatGeek. All right, let's get straight to the offensive line that consisted of every starter aside from Jawan Taylor, who didn't play. So Jalen Moore worked in at the right tackle spot, while Trey Smith was right guard, Creed obviously center, Kingsley left guard, and Josh Simmons held it down at the left tackle spot per usual, with Gardner Minshew under center. Yes, Mahomes and Kelsey both did not play last night, and key starters were held out most likely because of the fact they were playing on turf, and as we just saw with all the injuries that happened last night, it was probably for the better. Anyway, after watching all 10 snaps of Jalen Moore, then all 10 snaps of Josh Simmons, and then again all 10 snaps of Kingsley Suamataia, I was actually the happiest with Jalen Moore. I think he did a pretty dang good job on the right side and will for sure be a valuable swing tackle for the team this season. He might have missed his assignment on one run play, but other than that, I thought he was solid. Then Josh Simmons also played pretty well in this one. He did have a pass pro loss, getting knocked down on one play, but he did hold on long enough to give Creed Humphrey time to take the pass rusher on. Simmons won most of his pass pro reps other than that, but struggled on a couple of the run plays, with his assigned defender shedding his block pretty quickly and being able to get to the running back. One was definitely worse than the other, but that stuff can definitely be cleaned up over time. The most concerning of the three was Kingsley Suamataia. He was kind of the inverse of Simmons. He looked pretty good, honestly, in the run game, showcasing his power with decent success, but he lost 2 to 3 of his pass protection snaps, and again, he only played 10 snaps total all night. 2 of those were for sure losses, and they were quick losses at that, one affecting a third down, not being able to be converted. It's still a small sample size here, I know, but Kingsley has now had arguably 3 bad pass pro losses in just 12 pass block reps over the course of 2 preseason games. Seth Keysor of KCSN pointed out in his Substack article today that Kingsley is losing 25% of the time so far on those pass pro snaps. That means Kingsley is essentially allowing wins equivalent to the success rate of Chris Jones on definite passing downs. Seth then said, quote, "That's a legitimate problem and one the Chiefs need to come to grips with. Left guard will never torpedo an offense the way left tackle can, but unless what we're seeing from Suamataia in a small sample size is markedly worse than what he'll do during the season, it will absolutely lead to killing some drives." Again, it's all a small sample size. I'm not going to freak out and overreact, and we did know going from a top 3 guard in Joe Thuney to Kingsley Suamataia, who's never played guard before, would involve growing pains. I just hope he doesn't look this bad during the regular season. Once you get to week 3, 4, 5, he really needs to have a lot more wins than losses. So maybe next week, a week where more of the starters will be playing at Arrowhead, I think including Mahomes, per the words of Andy Reid last night, we'll start to find some more success, and Kingsley can just continue to get rep after rep after rep under his belt. He needs time, and reps are only going to help him. With all that being said, though, I am still a bit nervous right now at the interior line position, specifically left guard, because between Kingsley and Mike Caliendo, I'm not overwhelmed at the options for either of those guys playing left guard long term if things get dicey or an injury hits the room, and therefore, similar to the safety room, I think the Chiefs should consider adding a veteran interior offensive lineman here soon, especially if Kingsley has a couple of quick losses next week as well. As far as standouts on offense go, though, I thought Gardner Minshew looked pretty good out there as he finished the evening 7 of 9 for 70 yards and a touchdown. After these 2 games from Minshew, I'm more confident in him as KC's backup than I was with Carson Wentz at this point last year. In fact, I think he's a lot better. Minshew connected a couple of times on the same drive with tight end Robert Tonyan, by the way, who once again had a great night catching 5 passes for 41 yards and a touchdown. That touchdown play, by the way, showed Big Bob breaking off of his route and just getting open, finding a soft spot in the defense for Gardner Minshew, leading to the score. So Tonyan has now led the pass catching room in back-to-back weeks and needs to find his way onto this roster, especially with Jared Wiley still working back from that ACL injury. So roll with 4 tight ends if that's what it takes. I think he needs to be on there. 2 of those catches from Tonyan were on back-to-back plays from quarterback Chris Oladokun, who got into the game before Bailey Zappi this go-round, and deservedly so. Chris looked pretty dang good out there and is the most mobile of the bunch, so he's quite a bit of fun to watch. That second pass to Tonyan was a Mahomes-esque sidearm as well, which made my eyebrows raise way up. The wide receiver room got way more interesting yesterday as well because of the recent updates on Rashee Rice and his upcoming suspension, so I'll get to that here in a moment, but I think the highlight of the running back room last night was for sure Brashard Smith. I mean, early on, Isaiah Pacheco caught a quick pass from Minshew up the right sideline and screamed downfield for 22 yards. A very impressive showing and showed Pop has that speed back. But plays like that from him are the expectation. So I was happy to see it, but more pleasantly surprised with Brashard Smith, who had arguably the best run of the night on this play here, hitting the spin move, spamming that B button to prevent a loss of yards and turn that into a really impressive first down. Kareem Hunt didn't play at all in this one as he heals up from a quad contusion, and so the pecking order in the running back room seemed to show some favoritism towards the fullback, Carson Steele. He got work in immediately after Isaiah Pacheco, and from there, Elijah Mitchell sprinkled in, and Brashard Smith got the bulk of his work after Mitchell. But I honestly think we need to see Brashard come into the game sooner. He might be the most explosive running back in the entire room, even over Pacheco, and the plays he was making last night with the third and second string offensive line has his stock up. Meanwhile, Elijah Mitchell's stock might be a bit more down, I think. I mean, he averaged 2.3 yards per carry compared to Brashard's 7.3 yards per carry, and Brashard also had 2 receptions for 16 yards, with the bulk of that coming from a pretty fun pop pass behind the line of scrimmage. So he's a lot of fun, but hear me out. What if we see less of Carson Steele this week instead. I rewatched all of Elijah Mitchell's snaps and honestly would like to see more from him as well. His carries did not look as bad as his average reflected given the circumstances. Yeah, he had that safety, but he was going nowhere. He had no chance to succeed on that play. Both Elijah and Smith, they got more burst, they got more speed than Carson Steele, and while it was the most predictable play in all of Chiefs history going against his favor, Steele couldn't convert the fullback dive on 4th and 1, so maybe it's a hot take, but I want to see Steele work in a bit less this upcoming week and more reps from Elijah Mitchell and Brashard Smith. The one thing about Brashard that didn't really impress me was his work as a returner on special teams. He needs more chances for sure, but in the limited looks he did have, it involved a 19-yard kick return, albeit he did return it deep from the end zone. Dave Toe probably said, hey, no matter where you catch this, just take it out. So that worked against him for sure, but then he also muffed a punt later on that thankfully bounced out of bounds. Meanwhile, wide receiver Skyy Moore, he dropped a kickoff in the end zone and had a very rough showing on offense, dropping not one, but two pretty quote-unquote easy passes. That second dropped pass was just 1 or 2 plays later after the dropped kickoff, so I was absolutely bewildered by the whole thing, the whole experience. I was not even sure if Skyy was just out here trolling. I thought to myself, okay, there is now absolutely no way any of the coaching staff can justify keeping Skyy Moore on the 53, right? But then, near the end of the game, this man decided to return a punt 88 yards for a house call. The most impressive special teams play of the day, bar none. I was shook out of my soul. Shout out to Jalen Royals, though, because he had a 50-yard kickoff return that was the second most impressive play of the day, in my opinion. Anyway, I was happy for Skyy to have that play because it was a very rough day for him prior to that, but part of me then got a little scared. I was like, surely the coaching staff is going to find a way to think this is enough to get this man on the roster. Well, honestly, I think the answer to that is still no, and Skyy's not making it, especially considering Rashee Rice looks to be starting the season out not suspended and will be on the 53-man roster rather than the reserve suspended list. Long story short, the NFL wanted to suspend Rashee Rice 10 games, but rightfully so, Rice, his agent, and the NFLPA all thought that was absolutely ludicrous and asked for probably closer to 4 games. Well, from there, both sides were so far apart on a compromise that Rice's camp then asked for a hearing from an independent arbitrator, and that's why the September 30th meeting got scheduled. So no, the NFL isn't trying to rig things for the Chiefs. They actually wanted him suspended for as long as Justin Tucker and just 1 game shy of Deshaun Watson. Now, both parties can still settle before September 30th, so when Rice is suspended is still up in the air and could be as late as even the back half of the season, depending on how everything plays out. Once all is said and done, I think Rice might serve roughly 6 games, but we shall see. And that's why I think the wide receiver room just got even more competitive. Tyquan Thornton, though, is basically a roster lock at this point to me. He caught a great pass for a first down from Minshew early on, spinning around as he made the grab, and he worked into the game pretty early on. In fact, he didn't play another offensive snap after the first series and a half or so, leaving the field the same time as Juju Smith-Schuster and Jalen Royals. So count me in on Tyquan Thornton with a question mark on Nico Remigio, and then just so you know, Jason Brownlee worked all the way into basically the end of the fourth quarter. I think he is the odd man out, especially with Rice most likely staying on the 53. Let's get to Nico, though. I think Nico does make it as the team's punt returner still because I'm going Nico over Skyy all day as the returner, and even in his limited looks on offense, he can catch passes. Combine that with the fact that nobody else, aside from Skyy, but no thanks, has stood out on punt returns, and I think the wide receiver room looks like this. Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, Hollywood Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, Jalen Royals, Tyquan Thornton, and then Nico Remigio as your returner and depth piece on offense as wide receiver 7. But with all that being said, let me know your thoughts on this game and your biggest takeaways. Who's the biggest risers? What are your biggest concerns? And how do you think the wide receiver room is shaping up at this point in time? Let me know either way in the comments down below. And until next time, let's go. Let's freaking go. How about those?